Play, 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 play. Just a second. Okay, so I am going to be giving you a brief overview through the chapters because this past week and a half we have covered a lot of chapters and it's kind of confusing, but we got through it. So I'm taking you through the chapters and kind of combining them all together and showing you the gist. First, we start out with the ions, and it is a common mineral that emits sparks when struck against steel and is often mistaken for gold or fool's gold. It is not worth its weight in gold, and pyrite can be used as a source of sulfur in the production of sulfuric acid, a commonly used industrial chemical. This is an example of a crystalline solid. And this was kind of opening up and starting the chapters. And this is where we started off. And valence electrons are the electrons in the highest occupied energy level of an element's atom. Just something to remember and know. And we worked a lot with the periodic table. We had like 3 worksheets over it. And I'm not very good at the periodic table, so it was good use and practice for me when converting and just knowing better where all the elements are located. And if anything, we should have pulled out the knowledge of how to work well with the periodic table throughout this previous week because this was like continuous practice for us and it was very, very useful. And this is just like one of the labs we did. It's the intermolecular attractions and the molecular properties. And this is kind of in the middle of all these chapters. And it's the melting and boiling points of most compounds composed of molecules are low compared with those of ionic compounds. And this is kind of important to remember. When we were in the middle of this lab and melting that and knowing that we had to melt it for 10 minutes. And melting a network solid would require breaking covalent bonds throughout the solid. So that's kind of good to know that the covalent bonds are breaking in this point. And then just another chart that was helpful that we went through a lot. It summarizes the characteristic difference between ionic and covalent substances to help us get the gist of the difference between the two. And notice that ionic compounds have higher melting points than molecular compounds. Ionic compounds also tend to be soluble in water. Keep that one in mind. Naming ions. When the metals in group 1A, 2A, and 3A lose electrons, which we learned about those groups, they form cations which with positive charges equal to their group number. And this would all make sense if you have gone through this process, which we have gone through. And the charge of an ion of a group A nonmetal is determined by subtracting 8 from the group number. This was also explained in our book and just something that is to be kept in our minds. And the charges of these cations of many transition metal ions must be determined from the number of electrons that have been lost. And these are just some symbols and names of common metal ions and more than one ionic charge. So this is kind of looks like our worksheet, which we had to work through this whole week. Common polyatomic ions, which are listed below, and these were also important on our worksheet. And the names of most polyatomic ions end in ITE or ATE, which you would easily learn when writing them down 10 times each. This is just some facts and some important reminders to remember about the periodic table and binary compounds. To name any binary ionic compound, place the cation's name first, followed by the anion name. And to be exact, a binary compound is composed of 2 elements and can be either ionic or molecular. When writing these formulas for binary ionic compounds, write the symbol of location and then the anion. Add whatever subscripts are needed to balance the charges, which is on the worksheets of what we have done and had to write a lot of. And then to name a compound containing a polyatomic ion, state the cation first and then anion just as you did in naming binary ionic compounds. So these are just important factors to remember when writing stuff down throughout this periodic table that we had to use to help us complete this in chemistry this past following week and a half.